My art reckons with our mistakes, the errors we keep making. It takes the shit that nobody wants to deal with and puts it in your face through multiple forms. Fingerprints, digital art, prose poetry, video, and performance. So you can't avoid it. Whether the issues are personal, cultural, political, historical. I'm dealing with it. Now you deal with it. Take responsibility. Think. Question. Dig. The diverse media I use force confrontation. My art is about remembering, but it is also about reparation. It reminds us that we are human and in this together. To convey the interactive and performative nature of my art, its social justice bent, I wanted to create a live work sample in which individuals engage with it and with me. On 29 July 2021, I invited my references who had never before gathered together to participate in this event. I asked them each to choose one of 6 Million's work period prose poems and prepare a question evoked by the poem for me to answer on the day we recorded the video. I practiced the prose poem but did not know the questions ahead. I wanted to capture the intellectual spontaneity and choices made in the moment that arise in a conversation bending more toward the improvisational than the rehearsed. The result is this video that showcases my art. Making art is a responsibility, and like all other responsibilities, it isn't always fun and easy to do. This video was not an effortless endeavor for me because I don't like looking at my gawky movements and my overall nerdy appearance. But I had to let all this self-conscious stuff go, stand tall in my uncomfortableness, and perform my art. A chain of actions I repeat each time, and that leads to visually compelling and uber honest work. Work period 30th April 2018 through 6 May 2018. And this prose poem was chosen by Marcy B. Friedman. And before I read it, I wanted to ask you why you picked it.
It's embarrassing to tell you why I picked it, but I'm not afraid of being embarrassed in public. I picked it because I know the quantity of work you put out, and I knew that I did not have time to read through everything. So I decided I would go year by year looking at things that you did that included my birth date, which is May 5th. And I picked that one in particular of the various May 5th ones I read because you address the issue of cell phones. And as you know, I don't own a smartphone. I will never own a smartphone. And the touch of antipathy to smartphones in that piece made me pick it.
Okay, sounds good. And I wrote this, I was, that Friday before, I was at dinner at table 9, and I was looking at this blue glow on all the people's faces, and I just began writing this story that like we were about to be attacked and nobody knew it but me. Okay. The restaurant's din was louder than the sound made by a quartet of sledgehammer musicians striking the towers of a suspension bridge. All the patrons sat around their tables, staring into their smartphones, while they talked about the probability of a third world war. The blue light emitted by this throng of digital devices created an eerie glow that could be seen by the bombardier in the B-17 Flying Fortress soaring overhead. I am the only person who knows we are all going to die, but I am not able to utter a single word. I recently lost my ability to speak as a result of violently shaking my head to punk and heavy metal music for 11 straight years. I also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. This condition was triggered by a terrifying incident I witnessed when I was 10 years old. Of course, I only make my condition worse when I read books on such events as the Holocaust, the Second World War, and the murder of Emmett Till. I am not the makings of a hero, or am I? I know the Flying Fortress well, because we fought nose to nose over Hiroshima when I begged her to let the successful detonation of a nuclear bomb remain a test. I lost once before and am willing to fight again because now I have been further hardened by a painful number of errors driven by power, money, greed, prejudice, and hatred. I see these 5 things as related. You really do need money to gain power. Then, after you believe you have an upper hand on God and more money than Wells Fargo, you grow ever gluttonous. On the day your influence and wealth fade, you will blame, persecute, and destroy an entire race because your total collapse has nothing to do with you. In the end, you are a hatred machine. But all machines eventually wear down, and it will be your first victim who adds these tired scraps to a mound of rubbish. So here I am, wrestling in the sky with a flying fortress to save an inventory of smartphones and the people attached to them. This mute dinosaur is going to win, so the smartphones below can use their people to stop the Third World War.
Well done. I'm glad I picked it. So, my question for you is this. In this piece, as in so many of your pieces, you address past, present, and future. If you were told that moving forward, you could only address one time frame in each of your pieces, which would you pick, past, present, or future?
I think the past, because then I can reflect on it and project into the future. Because it's like, I think my whole thing, and it was in 1992, Carl Ray came up to my studio, and she was talking about, it was the women in Bosnia, and there was like, I guess, there was a war, and these women were getting raped, and I had no idea what was going on. And she said to me, you really got you got to like snap out of it. You do your art, but you also have to know what's going on. And I remember and I really took that like to heart. Like I was like, that's a problem that I'm not, following what's going on in current events. And then it was that point, and then on 9/11, I used to listen to David Harris do commentary on news radio, and he was the executive director, I think, of the American Jewish Committee at the time. And his commentaries began to like wake me up. And I think that then in like 2002, 3, I started getting involved in history. And I find that by learning about these, these different events, whether they're positive or negative, it helps me to look back on them and then bring them into the future, and because I have learned from them, and to pass that on to somebody else. And if I were just to choose, well, I'll take the future, then I wouldn't be able to pull from the past and compare it. And I think that's the best way for me to answer the question.
You did a fine job, thank you.
Okay, now, work period 31 August 2020 to 6 September 2020, and it was picked by Jennifer Braille. So before I read it, Jen, why did you pick it?
Well, there are a number of reasons I picked it. First of all, very simply, I loved one of the images in here, and that was the one of hitting your elbow against a piece of furniture, which I thought was really great. And I was just interested in some of the things you play with here, and your declaration that your art needed change. And I just find it all very fascinating and interesting, because I myself am not an artist, and so I like to hear about art and the artistic process.
Okay.
So that's why.
All right, and just before I started, there was a diner on Bank Street, and my friend Maya Reed, who you all know, when she was still living in the area, she moved up to Hudson, I was here, and I would get together with her and her children, and she introduced me to this little diner, and I fell in love with it. And I don't know, in this piece, and there was this door in the back near like this, like crusty old emergency exit. So I imagined myself sitting in that diner. And it's one of my favorite places, and unfortunately, I think they closed it. I checked today. I sit as still as the dead in the booth closest to the emergency exit of the little diner on Bank Street. The waitress walks over with a pot of hot coffee. She is dressed in black and white. I am wearing gray, and this makes her angry because she wants to figure me out. Define me, so she can play it safe and move on to the next patron. But I am dead, and I am gray. No one can render me black and white. I am the one you don't want to look at because I am ugly. I am the one you don't want to listen to because I am worse off than you. I am the one you don't want to pay because I have more money than God. I am God because you are misguided by advertisements telling you I am. This is why I sit in the booth, closest to the emergency exit, disguised as the dead. Because I want to escape from the likes of you. This piece is going to disturb the persons who misunderstand my art. The same individuals who liked the other stuff I did before more facets formed on my life and transformed my art. But my art needed change, and I didn't have the courage to let go. I admit I don't have the strength to move continents, but this makes me human and drives me to produce. I want to make art that pushes me to pain. Not the pain I feel when I hit my elbow on the corner of a piece of furniture, but the kind of pain I feel when I stand face to face with something so honest I am not worthy to say it is mine.
So, that's a pretty packed piece, and I loved it when I read it, and I loved listening to it. I've listened to it a number of times. And change and pain are like two very important aspects of, I think, of what you're talking about. And I guess I want you to tell me a little bit about why it's so important for you. I mean, you talk about other people perhaps being uncomfortable because of changes in your art, but also I get the sense that to you, it's important for you to be uncomfortable in your art, or for your art to make you uncomfortable. Almost like you don't want to just be satisfied with the status quo, but you're constantly challenging yourself, and sometimes that's painful. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
And there's one thing I'll say, and I feel like I don't want to be finger pointing Carla Ray, but one time, it was 1997, and I had been making these rubber sculptures. And, I had noticed, and I was trying to avoid thinking it would come in and out of my hand. I'm saying, I'm getting a little too efficient at these. Like, I got it down, I do the sketch, I draw out the model, I futz with the model, get it right, do the pattern, order the material, and then she walks in. I'll never forget, she comes in, she's like, Linda Jean, you're really getting good at this. I was like, shit. I was like, she said it, and now I know. Like I've been spotted. You know what I mean? And then at that point, I started to shift back into painting. And then, in around the same time, I think it was 97, 98, 99, Marcy did a lecture at Chappaqua Library named No Map, No Compass, No Problem. And Fred Gillen Jr. was married to Bev at the time. She was away, so he and I went. And we're at this thing, and I remember sitting there as she's talking about, her work and how it just there's no map, no compass, she has no problem. And I'm like, oh, the day that I could feel that liberating. And then I thought, well, is this me, creating this, this place where I can be locked in. And then I realized when I went to school, right, in the 80s, it was, 85, 86, 87, 88, everything was series. You gotta do a series of these. Okay, the painting department is here, the sculpture department is here, but don't mix them up. right? And this is now, you know, there's, you look in the descriptions and they actually have interdisciplinary art. I mean, it was a really different time. Everything had a category, you know? And it's a really scary thing when you, especially when you're doing something and everybody loves it, and then you change. And I had been doing all these sculptures, and then there's big sculptures, and then I'm down to these little paintings on 8.5 by 11 paper. Larry D'Amico wanted to bring Bill Maxwell, and I think the people from the museum, like Livia Strauss, he wanted to do some studio visits. He came, and I can remember distinctly, I was in the old studio. They're knocking at the door, and in a picture that's forever in my mind is my hand on the doorknob, and I'm saying, all right, here we go. I'm just about to open this door, and they're just gonna, and they're all like, oh my God, we weren't expecting this, and I'm like this, and they loved it. And the thing that, it was Livia said, oh no, she goes, I can see that the same artist is doing all this stuff, because you take things apart and put it back together. But by using those examples, I think I answered your question. It's like there was this, you know, it's like when my mother would tell me when I was a little kid, hold your stomach in, sit up tall, don't pick your nose in public, you know, that kind of stuff. Then you're an artist and there's work in series, you know, you can't combine stuff and blah, 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 creating rules. And I think, and I'm going to say again, the reason why I picked Marcy and Carla Reyes, the two artists, was because throughout my artistic life, they have been the ones that push my buttons. And, you know, and I always say, if it wasn't for Carla Ray, I would not be making fingerprints and calling them art.
Okay, and do you think that all artists need to be pushed, or is it just endemic to you?
I think that I would say it really depends on the individual, because then there's some people that don't want to be pushed.
Right.
They want to just be comfortable. You know, I mean, Fred and I, you know, Fred Gillen, again, to bring him up, we've talked a lot about being uncomfortable. And that is, you know, sometimes you got to sit in your blunders or whatever the heck you're doing or not. I mean, I would sometimes for hours when I was working on that Leonardo's uterus piece, I'd be sitting, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And it was so frustrating. But I said, if I stick with it, I know if I stick with it. And I did, and then I started painting again. And if I had, you know, so it's all these things happen. And I think it's being willing to just let it go. Like, I would say, you know, before when I was in 12-step, you know, I was really a control freak, you know, and I remember thinking to myself, I imagine myself, when you're on 9D, there's a tunnel. When I was a little girl, we would go with my grandmothers, and when my mother would have us under the tunnel, we'd all scream, you know, they had the convertible, it was great. And I have this tunnel in my head, and that I'm driving towards it, but all of a sudden I get stuck into a rut and I crash into the wall. And it was at that point I realized I've got to get out of the car and let the work drive, and then that's not going to happen because it's not going to go in a rut, because it's just going to do what it wants. It would be like forcing your kid to walk around in size 7 shoes when they need 8. And that's what I think, you know, it's like that growth, that freedom of just growing. And I think some people have maybe the strength to do it, others don't, and others just, you know, couldn't care less, I guess.
But you care.
I care.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope I answered your question, because I have a tendency to answer with examples.
Yes, all right, that was good, thanks.
Okay, now. The next piece, it's work period 22 February 2021 through 28 February 2021. And Dr. Ashley Cross picked this piece. And I want Ashley to say why she picked it, and then I'm going to share a little tidbit before I read it.
Great, wonderful. I just want to say I also love that shape-shifting part of your work, that changing, the continuous change, the morphing, the fluidity. Yeah, and I chose this piece kind of the way Marcy did, because you're so prolific, it's overwhelming too. So I did something a little sort of self-centered also. I chose one where I appear. And, but actually we all four appear, and that's part of what I love about the poem. Carla Ray, Marcy, Jen, and I are all in this poem. And so I chose it because of that. But I also chose it because I love the process too, Jen. Like you do the process you go through, right? So you start with a fingerprint, and I keep watching your finger waving around at us, right, while you're talking sometimes with the ink on it. The process of going from fingerprint to, to video art to finally a poem. So I went for something formal that I think does some of the things that you do in all your work. The catalog. I love catalogs. I like lists. I'm interested in lists and how they work because they try to make everything equal. Like everything has an equal weight in a list, right? And this is a list, right, that is of possessions that individuals have. But in creating that list, you also cross a lot of boundaries, and that's the shape shifting that I really like, right? So you go from someone who's a real person to someone who's fiction, right? From something that is an actor to someone who's just a local friend, from someone who owns a thing to somebody who owns an emotion or characteristic. So I like that shape shifting. And then of course it opens out to include the four of us, but it includes Big Bird, and it ends with you.
Yeah.
Wait, he's not real?
Well, he is real, especially because we're met right now.
Because
He's real. Okay, so Wallace and Gromit, can they be not real? They're kind of real too, aren't they?
I'm not sure.
Point is, right, the fiction and the reality, right, and the biography and the autobiographical and the not so autobiographical are all blending together. So that's why I really chose it.
Okay.
I like all of that it does.
And the interesting thing is I train Ashley, she's one of my personal training clients, and whenever I send out, I try, the email to confirm, I put a little picture. Now, it could be a GIF, and it could be, and it usually has something that reminds me of that person, something I think that will be funny. Well, Ashley loves, Frankenstein, the Mary Shelley book, but also Boris Karloff and everything. Well, I had found, and I'll pass it around, this photograph of Boris Karloff being sculpted by Ivan Simpson. And he's wearing suspenders. And I said to Ashley, did you check him out? He was really I found him, looked really hot in this picture. And I was check out those suspenders. I could start a prose poem with Boris Karloff's suspenders. And that started the whole thing.
That's great.
Okay, and actually Edie's mentioned in this too. All right. Boris Karloff's suspenders. Cynthia Wade's Twinkie. Cicely Tyson's awareness. Helen Frankenthaler's apron. George Farmer's stopwatch. Iggy Pop's microphone. Gene Simmons's codpiece. Robert Caro's notes. Woody Allen's typewriter. Joseph Anson's photographs. Wallace and Gromit's teeth. Alyssa Zellman's peanut. Georgia O'Keeffe's hands. Grace Fisher's Bible. George Washington's thighs. Leonardo's notebooks. Maya Reed's collages. Johnnika Graham's office. Robin Miles's voice. Kevin David's Chains, Elwyn Hutter's Laugh, Jennifer Braille's Humility, Charlotte Schultz's Details, Peg Taylor's Tenacity, James C. Wright's Compositions, Caesar Castroverdi's Calves, Cloris Leachman's Everything, Cleonice Hanson's Macaroni and Cheese, Kimberly Miller Bronner's Salutatorian Speech, Neil O'Leary's Record Collection, Cynthia Knox's Social Responsiveness, Harvey Hutter's Eclectic Interests, Bebby Hutter's Ironclad Will.
It's like near the anniversary of her death, and it's
Maria Abenell's Uncommon Flexibility, Mark Barth's Latissimus Dorsi, Peter Moretti's Arch Roofs, Jean Moretti's Escarole Soup, Pat Brigham's Reading Glasses, Edie Ellis's Art Collection, Robert Oppenheimer's Pork Pie Hat, Genevieve Fisher's Sewing Machine, Vincent Fisher's Salted Beer, Thomas Fisher's Little Skeleton, Peggy Weiss's Pink House, Wonder Woman's Invisible Plane, Susie Quattro's Bass Riffs, Madeline Kahn's Singing Voice, Natalie Desuray's Portrait Paintings, Ray Lowry's Yellow Book, Margie Zellman's Shadow Boxes, Richard Hanson's Religious Experience, Amanda DiGiacomo's Tiny Handwriting, Lou Tangora's Diverse Projects, Beverly Army Williams's Missing Thesaurus, Abby Cross's Maternal Grandmother, Linus Van Pelt's Security Blanket, June Boyle's Interior Designs, Kathy Perry's Pre-Cambrian Period, Jania Hutter's Passionate Diamonism, Timothy Lang's Renaissance Man, Kay Jackson McGuire's Tote Bag, Diane Leach's Biology Notebook, Victor Borga's Punctuation Marks, Catherine Livingston's Innovative Athleticism, Jean and Gary Shaw's Xmas Cards, Rochelle and Bob Hanson's Family Reunions, William L. Shirer's Sense of Humor, Charles Fisher's Tool and Die, Mary Ellen Keefe's Shrunken Head Story, Sally Barnes's Balloon Handling Skills, Joyce Moretti Fisher's Playtex Living Gloves, Marcy B. Friedman's 16 Opening Mats, Hallie Wolf's 2008 Fitness Gold, Big Bird's Teddy Bear Radar, Victor Bianchi's 1986 Leonardo Machine, Carla Ray Johnson's Screwdriver Ignition Key, Lucia Belsey's water tower paintings, Denise Martin's little clay sculptures, Amy Goldsmith's 45 set workouts, Gary Plotch's World of Soap, Elizabeth Fairbanks Fletcher's Rock Star Stance, Eugene Bullard's White Dress Shirt, Victor Littlejohn's Paper Shredder Artwork, Dr. Ashley Cross's Library of Books, Fred Gillen Jr.'s Silver Cat-Eye Glasses, Linda Cooper's Binders of Fitness Programs, Carla Grimaldi's 20-gauge shotgun, Dana Capobianco's Walk Up the Staircase, Scott Davis's Painting a Week assignment, Medgar Evers's Enforcement of Voting Rights, Amy Cabot's Don't Try Too Hard, Robert Shaw's Quint the Shark Hunter, Michael Corbett's Impersonation of Diana Ross, Martha Mercedes' Library of Music Theory books, Felicia Catalano's Fur Mouse from Lincoln Center, Shanitra Brinson's Gallery of Wonder Woman collectibles, Daniela Dooling's Skeleton of the Thorax Droid, Art Hutter's Bike Rides with Karen Hennis, Jim Rollins's Taekwondo Kicks over Percussion Instruments, Lauren Gottschalk's School of Visual Arts graduation photo, Judy James's 1970 purchase of Norman the Doorman, Jeanette Barth's 13-minute and 31-second floor plank, Linda Jean Fisher and the Fletcher 6100 computerized mat cutter.
So moving, Jay. It's so moving.
It's hard.
No, because that just shows how powerful lists are never just lists. They're not just lists. Those aren't things. They aren't just, they're right, they have this real resonance for you, but also into the world. They matter. Like, they matter in the world, but they matter physically and emotionally. They have that affective thing. That was really moving. Thank you.
Because first I was like, stop. And I was like, I want to just keep going. Now I'm almost afraid to ask you a question.
I'm going to ask you a really specific question.
Oh,
I
sure.
have a lot of questions. I'm sure we all would like to ask you lots of different questions, right? My question is going to be really specific about the ending.
Okay.
And I'm going to just make two observations, and then I just would like you to talk about the last line of the poem, because the last line of the poem is a reference to yourself, right? And that's foregrounds to me the way it's the sort of poem is always boundary crossing, right? If you listen to the poem with the video, what's quite startling is that you read that line about Linda Jean Fisher and the I'm not going to say the Fletcher 6100 computerized mat cutter, right? And right when you do that, it goes to your hands. It's right with your hands. So it's a very self-reflexive moment to me, a moment when you're commenting on your art. I don't know if you mean it to be that. And also in the poem, it changes, the form changes. Everywhere else, if you look at the list, it's a possessive, right? Right, Carla Ray Johnson's ignition lock, right? I'm not going to have the whole word, but right? But in the last line, it's an and. What difference does that and make? and the reference to yourself at the end.
Well, it's funny because that's a really good question, and I was going to do my fingerprint or my stained finger, but then I remembered the Fletcher, and I loved working at the art barn. Sorry, I keep thinking about Bevy, and it's okay. And there were really great years there, and I was like known as Fletcher's mother, you know, like new framers would come in and I would get introduced, oh, this is Linda Jean, and then they'd say, that's Fletcher's mother, you know? And it was this huge mat cutter. You operated it with a computer. And I was like really connected to it. And when I was writing the piece, I was like, you know, it would be so easy for me to say the fingerprint. But really, when I think of myself, and this is true, the first thing that pops into my head is that mat cup. And it's like, it was like my, you know, like an extension. I had this relationship with it. And like, we were like two peas in a pod. We like worked together. And it like took on this human form. And I was like, no, I don't want to do my artwork. I want to be with Fletcher at the end. And that's kind of why I did it. And I think it's talk about like in art, you know, there's so many happy accidents. It's like when I design programs for people when I'm a trainer. You have these things that happen when you're creating a flow in the system, and then all of a sudden you'll be like, wow, you know, that person gets to use that same dumbbell over here, and it just flows in, they don't have to get up, they can blah, blah, blah. And then like when you're doing art, you're like, wow, like I never even thought of all the hours that I spent. I mean, I spent like 20 years as a custom picture frame working with my hands, and that the two, wow, like I never even noticed that. Like, you know, that how they kind of come together. But that's why, because Fletcher was like my friend, and I miss Fletcher.
They're things, they define us, right?
Right.
They give us identity, their agency.
You know, but that was, I really, that was mine. And it was also, I knew the form was different, and I tried, because when we worked together last summer on the Guggenheim statement, and you sort of reawakened this whole interest of mine in writing, and for years, I had stroke and white, and I would say, well, but, I'm an artist, so, I don't need to, know grammar. I can just kind of use this and excuse it. Well, I'm not really a writer, I'm an artist, so, if there's some horrible error, it doesn't matter because I'm an artist. And I was like, that's a real cop-out. And I really got to crack down and, dig in the dirt and get down to the nuts and bolts. And the experience working with you last summer, it really, I can't even begin to tell you how it helped my writing. And when I was doing this, I'm like, oh, geez, I don't know how I can do this parallel. This isn't going to happen. And I'm trying to figure out how I did it was the length. If it was the person and their thing, if it was 2 words or 1 word, and then I grouped those together. And then as they got crazy, where there was almost no, there weren't any similar with the number of words, then I just, put them all at the end and went from shortest to longest. But there was, and then that last one, I was like, it's just that, and that was it. And that was me and the Fletcher. I hope I answered your question.
You did. I think it's a profound use of grammar shift at the end, right? So a repetition becomes a repetition with a difference, and
Yes.
you read it differently.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But no,
Thank
there's,
you.
definitely, a great experience. Work period 10 May 2021 to 16 May 2021. Carla Ray Johnson. And Carla Ray, why did you pick this piece?
Well, I look forward to when Linda Jean's prose poems show up, and I know we all do. So when you asked me to choose one, it was sort of like, well, who's your favorite kid? You know, that was a little hard. But I chose this one because it begins with several instances of past and historic moments that perhaps humanity is embarrassed by, that perhaps humanity should be embarrassed by, you know, sort of bad things that happen. And it sparked a question in me right away, so I was like, I guess that's the one.
Okay. All right. Are the overdose deaths by opioids a crisis? Is it true that Dylan Roof considers psychology a Jewish invention? Do you think Julius Rosenberg's execution was based on a phony charge and that Ethel Rosenberg was entirely innocent? Was it necessary for the United States to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan? If you could choose between getting cancer or dementia, which disease would you pick? Did you have the good fortune of knowing your grandparents? I think my wife has a superb derriere. Does this mean I am a shallow person? I make art every day. Am I disciplined, privileged, or both? I love reading nonfiction and listen to books to accomplish my research goals. Does listening to audiobooks have the same value as reading electronic, hardcover, and paperback books? Is a person who regularly attends religious services more spiritual than a person who does not? Do you get impatient standing in line at the grocery store, pharmacy, or hypermarket? My mom likes to relax and clean. What does your mom do to unwind? In 1981, my taxed Social Security earnings were $2,063. What were your Social Security earnings when you were 16 years old? Have you ever been involved in a road rage incident? If so, who is the aggressor? There is a troll living under the Bear Mountain Bridge. He claims the Holocaust was invented by Jews as part of a plot to advance Jewish interests. Okay. There is not a troll paying property taxes on land under the Bear Mountain Bridge. But there are monsters who deny the Holocaust happened. what, pray tell, is your question?
Well, you have, you've dedicated many years of your precious life, and are dedicating future years of your life to a project that tries to understand, in a way, I think, man's inhumanity to man. And you're doing it with your own body, with your finger. And I think that's a noble quest, and it brings, as this piece of writing does, it brings to the fore many, 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 many innumerable questions. So the question brought to mind for me has to do with a quote by Theodore Parker from the 19th century, later sort of endorsed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and then President Barack Obama, which was the question, does the arc of the moral universe bend towards justice? And the question brought that question to mind, and I would like to know if you have an answer for that, yes or no, and if you do have an answer, you think it bends toward justice or not, why that answer? Easy.
Here's, I'm going to tell the truth. When I read The Blood of Emmett Till, I remember looking up Jim Crow because I thought Jim Crow was a person. Okay. So, what does Martin Luther King mean by the arc? Because I've heard it so many times. And I'm like, I guess I don't have to answer the question because I don't, in other words, is he saying that will things come around so that the morals, that we'll have justice, so that there will be justice even though there's been all this injustice, that it will bend? Is that my interpretation?
It's like the overall thing, it's a huge arc. We cannot see even maybe the direction it's going, but these three gentlemen are saying it is, in their mind and heart, bending towards justice.
Well, I mean, that's a hard one to, I mean, that's one of those things that's like, how, I guess there's, I'm a very positive person, right? And I do see a difference, like when I think of, there's a lot of, we'll say, I'm going to use this as an example, there's a lot of bad press that like the internet gets with our youth and everything. Yet, you can go and get, like I used to have to get on my coat, get on my bicycle and ride to the library to get an answer. Now, I could just go on the computer and get it, right? So, the children, you can ask questions and be inquisitive. And I think, too, adults have evolved. Like, my mother, if I asked her a certain question, she'd be like, shh, keep it down, tone it down, don't say it too loud. Whereas, it's like when William Strunk Jr. says, if you don't know how to say a word, say it loud, because you don't want to, make the situation worse, but you can't pronounce it by whispering it. So it's kind of like, I feel, when I look around and I talk to people, and I feel that people are paying more attention to what's going on, and that, yes, I think things can go in toward justice. Because, I mean, I always would tease, the framers when I work with them about, justice, and, I'd say about, this project, and I say, well, me, I'm all about justice And, you know, and I think too, it's like there's more people out there that will ruffle feathers. Like, I think times have changed in the workplace. I mean, there's things that are creating proper boundaries, like with things like sexual harassment, right? You know, that wasn't there, now it's there. But yet, I feel that people amongst themselves are talking more openly about things maybe that they didn't like 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, when I think of, you know, some of like the teenagers that I met at the club that I would talk to, were you know, you could talk to them and they were I felt like they were plugged in and they knew what was going on. You know, it was different. Whereas I felt like I was raised and I was more naive. And I don't think the young people today are naive. And I think that more and more their parents are encouraging them to kind of wake up. And I think that it's like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think when an interview I saw with her, and she talked about her granddaughter. If you watch the documentary, I mean, I was like, you know, my favorite part of that movie, you'd think it would have been her doing the TRX and the push-up. I love that too, but when she was interacting with her granddaughter, because it was so candid, you know, it was like, you know, Booby, you know, do you want me to, you know, I'll make the tea, and they're in the kitchen and they're talking. And she said, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said during like a talk, I think she was talking to some students, that like, she said, well, people like my granddaughter, they're like, in other words, that they're good people and they have sound, like, you know, more like ethics and they're, you know, it's like, my hope, it's almost like she was saying she had hope in that they were gonna change things. And I think we have to be optimistic. I mean, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think, you know, I guess if we walk around thinking it's not bending in that direction, it's like, why, you know, it's almost like you don't even want to get up in the morning.
You certainly wouldn't be doing what you're doing.
No, it's got to be. It's got, you know, and it's like, you know, it's funny because I'll never forget. I was in the we have like a studio that they hold the group exercise classes at the gym when I was working there, and I used to help with the Silver Sneakers, and I was pumping up the little Silver Sneakers balls, and I'm in there pumping them up, and this guy comes in and he starts talking to me. I recognized him before, and I don't know how the conversation, maybe he said, oh yeah, I hear you're an artist, you know, what are you doing? And I told him what I was doing, and he turns to me and he goes, isn't that a waste of paper?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
You didn't strangle him?
I just kind of stood there, and I was like, well, I said, you can think what you want, but I'm going to keep doing my thing. Like there was, when I called up all the Holocaust museums, when I first started the project, one lady, and I think it was the museum in New York City, she goes to me, she goes, do you know how many Holocaust memorials there are? And I'm like, oh my God, this woman, like what? How can you, all you have to do is open a newspaper and like, oh, there's some genocide over here, some genocide over there. I mean, it's like, come on. You know, it's like, when I just was like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, some of the stuff that comes out of people's mouths. And then there was another person who said to me, why don't you just make a page and photocopy it? And I was like, well, I said, you're missing the point.
Slightly.
I said, it's the idea. You know? It's funny, you know, how, yeah. Well, I guess I just want to thank you all so much. And what happened, Jennifer had come up one day for her personal training session, and she turns to the boxes and she says, like, has the Guggenheim ever seen those boxes? And I said, I think I sent her a picture once, you know, and it got me thinking, maybe I gotta mix it up a little. I've been applying with my videos, I've applied with photographs of the project, I've applied with all different things. Maybe I have to create my own version of a work sample. And I thought it would be interesting to have the 4 people who were writing the letters and and choose a piece and ask me a question because I didn't know what it was going to be. And, as Fred Gillen Jr. always says, you got to put your balls to the wall. So thank you all so much for, I can't tell you, with the generosity of your time, between the planning of it and the thoughtful questions and everything, I'm very grateful. And it was really hard to end.
This is hard for us to.
And thank
Yes,
you for
thank
doing
you.
this, taking
Yeah.
on this project. It
Thank you.
means so much. It really does.
Thank you.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. I was blind, but now I see. La 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 Amazing grace. Amazing grace.
Is anger just a word, or is it a feeling? Is Linda Jean Fisher a human being or an alien being? I wear my creature from the Black Lagoon mask when I take a tubby. Does the thought of death make you uncomfortable? Electrofishing uses a direct electric current to attract and temporarily stop fish for easy capture. Is this fair to the fish? A glamorous person lives imaginatively, dresses stylishly, and moves gracefully. Does a person also need a kind heart to be glamorous? Are you tempted to press the hot button? I find books on English usage irresistible and wear them around my neck because they are priceless jewels. Do knuckleheads have lumpy craniums? I love Lamb Chop, the sock puppet, and shun anything in the meat department labeled with her name. The nouns monster and money each have 2 syllables. Mike, the first fusion bomb, was tested by the United States on November 1st, 1952. And an octopus has 8 muscular arms endowed with 2 rows of suckers. I played with pretend friends during most of the 6th grade. Investigate the answer to a question if it fits together perfectly, like the pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. The selection committees for the grants I reapply and reapply for are not rigged. You and your time are valuable, and the scale of your salary does not change this. I went for a sleigh ride on the top end of my trombone case when I was in the 4th grade. It didn't end well. I am the underdog who surprises the competition. The winged victory of Samothrace is a hair model, and the big bad wolf is a successful realtor. A cactus survives with little water and is characterized as a xerophyte. Who would you rather have as a yoke fellow, a cactus or a cow? Zootechnics is the technology of animal husbandry. What do you call the technology of human husbandry?